Okay, hello everybody and good evening. It's around 6:25. I apologize for being late. It's to some extent was out of my control. I gave another class before this and it sort of derailed me. So this is our third class on this Maimed, Kimei Tzaisecha. I figured that tomorrow we'll finish. I'm not giving long introductions. I already did that 2 days ago and yesterday. But the gist of the introductions, the nakuda of what we're learning, is that there's a maimed, two maimadim, hemshech, one after the next, that all speak of three meetings between land and sea. One during creation, one during Kriyas Yamsuf, which is the preparation for Matan Torah, and the third is called Bikiyas Hanar, which is the preparation for the Torah Chadash of Yosed Lovi. In the previous Maimed, these three ideas were presented to us as a Gilead of Havai Delatata, which is really Tzimtzum, Havai Deliela, which is really not Tzimtzum, and a Havai of Atzmus, which is, it's not only not Tzimtzum, it's not anything but truth, Eibishter. This Maimed added another dimension. But this additional dimension, which you haven't really fully delved into yet, I've been beating around the bush. We did the beginning and the end in the first class, where we tasted this additional dimension. Yesterday, it was mentioned by the Rebbe, but I had to tell you that this is where the Rebbe is going, because it's not yet explicit in yesterday's discussion, is that the Rebbe introduces the concept called Atzmus. And he makes it very, very clear that there's a difference between the word Atzmus and Gili HaAtzmus. He emphasized that there's a huge difference between the word Atzmus and the Gil, the revelation of Atzmus. Very important to appreciate that piece of information. Atzmus versus Gili HaAtzmus. And he says that everything we discussed in the last Maimed is talking about Giluyim, the revelation of godliness, the experienced presence of Him. From Havai Delatata is one level, Havai Deleila is a second level, and Havai Devatmus is a third level. And then there's Atzmus itself. In this Maimed, the presentation is going to be Atzmus itself was never revealed and never will be revealed. And it's the Nesinas Koyach. What empowers the bringing together of opposites, which is represented in this Maimed by the bringing together of land and sea, is affected by Atzmus. When the Eibishter created the world and the land and the sea converged, or the land displaced the sea, it was Ke'ech HaAtzmus. When the Eibishter took it out of Egypt and they crossed through the Yamsuf, and as the Rebbe said yesterday again, they didn't cross over, they simply circled back. Because the inyan of Kriyas Yamsuf was not to save them, it was for the sake of the Gili Elokus, which is associated with Kriyas Yamsuf. There was a merging of Yam and Yabosh, or a transfer. The Yam becomes Yabosh, as the Maimed described it. Those are two opposites coming together, and the Koyach to bring them together is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu represents Atzmus. Today, which is our third class, move on to the next step. Mashiach's going to come, and there's going to be a Gilui of Atzmus, which is called Torah Chadash. The Gilui of Atzmus is connected to what's called Bikiyas Hanar, the splitting of the river, which is, even in yesterday's class, he talked about Havai Deleili, including Havai Shabbat. It's an even higher inyan, I suppose, than Havai Shabbat. But the underlying constant is going to be that the Giluyim of Yosed Lovi are still Giluyim. The Koyach to affect this Giluyim is Atzmus himself, which was never revealed, and here comes the clincher, here comes the chap. The clincher is that Atzmus is more now than then. Or in the language of the Rebbe at the end of this Maimed, the Tainug HaNivra, the pleasure that we get from our role in this world, Nachas Ruach Shala Adam, is Gili HaAtzmus L'Yosed Lovi, and Nachas Ruach Shala Kadosh Baruch Hu, he calls it, is the mitzvahs we do now, which actually brings Atzmus into the world. So in this Maimed, by adding a new dimension, we're changing the entire equation. And he argues that by Kriyas Yamsuf, by Yetzias Mitzrayim, what was revealed was a certain level of Giluyim. But it's going to be Bikiyas HaNahar, by Yosed Lovi, is going to be even a higher level of Giluyim. Etzem itself is accomplished through the work we do now and is never revealed. So let's now learn inside. Let's learn the Maimer. V'hine, Perek Dal, bottom of page 279. I'm going to do the same thing we did yesterday. Yesterday we talked about Kriyas Yamsuf. We juxtaposed it against L'Rega Ha'aretz Ha'Lamoyim. Today we're going to talk about B'kiyas HaNahar. And like I did yesterday, I'm going to bring Moshe into the equation. I'm going to jump around a little bit. Bichlal, as you know, I don't necessarily teach Maimer. And I jump around a little bit to bring the Moshe aspect, the Atzmus aspect, which touches on this Maimer, on this piece of the Maimer, okay? And believe that tomorrow we'll complete it with Hashem's help. We'll complete it. V'hine. Kshem shekriyas Yamsuf, just like when Hashem split the sea originally. The splitting of the sea, which was representative, which meant a great revelation of godliness, a bringing together of opposites, set up the revelation of Torah which followed. But at the time of Har Sinai, what was primarily revealed then was Nigla. Now, of course, the Rebbe says this over and over again, that the Alter Rebbe said in the Baal Shem Tov, maybe even before, Matan Torah lo yi'ed pam. Even after Mashiach comes, there's never another occasion of the giving of the Torah. There's simply an occasion of revealing more of it. So the Torah, which we're going to have Liyosed Lave, was actually included in the Torah that the Eibush gave us out of Sinai. However, even though it was included in the Torah that the Eibush gave us at Har Sinai, it was not Be'ez Galus. When is it going to be revealed? It'll be revealed L'Asad Lavi in what's called the Torah Chadash. Kach, in the same way, Gam Kedem Shetzgala Pnimius HaTorah. When Mashiach comes, there's going to be a revelation of the level of Torah, which is called Pnimius, the face of the Torah, the inner dimension of Torah, which on the highest level is called the visual Torah, the Re'iyah. Lo'asi, it says, the Helike Rebbe, Tiyah HaChana, there's a need for a preparation. What is the preparation? The bringing together of opposites of land and sea on an even higher level than occurred by Kriyas Yamsuf, and it's represented therefore by B'kiyas HaNahar, the splitting of the river. And of course, you know that there's actually going to be two splittings. There's going to be splitting of the Yam again, as well as an additional idea, the splitting of the river. Like it says in the Pasuk, V'hein if Yadel by Yom Rucha. The beginning of the Pasuk is that V'hechrem ad Hashem es Hashem Yam Mitzrayim, that the Yam is going to split a second time. And then it says, V'hein if Yadel by Yom Rucha Evoka'ehu, and there's going to be Shiva Nacholim. Says the Chazal, Da Ruach Shel Mashiach, the Ruach, which is going to be present. That's going to affect B'kiyas HaNahar as the spirit of Mashiach. And the Rebbe concludes by saying, V'hefresh b'neim, the difference is, Sha'achona l'matan Torah gali the Torah. When Hashem prepared to give us the Torah on the level of Nigla, which is the Seichel HaTorah primarily, not so much Oira Torah. It's B'kiyas Hayam, to split the sea, Malchus. V'achona l'matan Torah, the Pnimius HaTorah. When Hashem is making preparation to give us the face of the Torah, the inner dimension of Torah, which is the Elokus of Torah, it's B'kiyas HaNahar, it's the splitting of the river. Two ideas, B'kiyas HaYam and B'kiyas HaNahar. Now, again, I talked about this in the previous Maimer. The best source that I know for this conversation is the Mittel Rebbe Shar HaEmunah, which is one long essay on Pesach, which is based on all Memorim of Pesach, the first days of Pesach and the last days of Pesach. And there's a huge discussion there on, I guess what we call today the aquifer, the way water cycles. Right, the water goes under the earth, and it comes out in little fountains which emerge on the surface, that trickle out of the hills, out of these little crevices in the ground, and slowly converges into little streams, which run into larger streams until they become a raging river. And then this raging river descends into the valley, and as the land flattens out, it tends to distribute itself into different tributaries, and it all ends up in the ocean. The waters of the ocean have salt, and the waters from the ocean seep back into the ground, and as it passes through the ground purifies the water, so the salt water becomes fresh, then it's pushed up again in the form of these fountains, and the cycle repeats itself. Now, Kabbalistically, each one of these steps is a different level. The fountains that emerge from underneath the earth is Chokhmah. The rivers which collect as these little tributaries join to get little streams, join to a very powerful river, is Bina. When this powerful river is not flowing in with gravity, it's sort of, the land equals out, it divides up into little streams. That would be the 6 midas or the 7 midas. And of course the ocean would be Malchus. The additional component here is that there's something called Mei HaTahoim, subterranean water. And according to Torah, there's two dimensions of subterranean water. There's subterranean water which never surfaces, and there's subterranean water which I guess we would call today the water table that does surface. Subterranean water that never surfaces is called Tohaim Ha'atzmi, the absolute Tohaim. Tohaim means abyss. And the subterranean water which can surface is the Tohaim, which is a ha'ara of the Tohaim Ha'atzmi. It's a secondary Tohaim because the waters rise up. And of course the idea is that the Tohaim puts pressure, it pushes upwards. And it's what causes the water to come out of the ground after the water seeps into the ground through the Yam. So Kabbalistically, the Tohaim Ha'atzmi would be like Atik. The ha'ara of Tohaim Ha'atzmi would be like Keser, Arich. The Mayones, the fountains, would be like Chochmah. The Noah would be like Bina. The Necholu would be like the Midas. And Yam would be like Malchus. And this is the Chayzechalu, this is the circle. That's how water goes. And of course, one of the things that happens when the water comes from under the ground to the surface is that they're called Mayim Chaim, living water. And they're called Mayim Chaim because of their link, because they're connected to waters that are underneath the ground, which are called Mayim Shein Lem Saf. They're philosophically, they're figuratively infinite. And therefore, there's the halachas of Mehamayon, the Metar B'Mashu, Metar B'Zeichelin, etc., 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 because they're called Mayim Chaim. And of course, Mayim Chaim are needed for Paraduma. Mayim Chaim are needed Be'ikeradin for Tfilas Zov. Otherwise, you can have other kinds of mikvahs as well. Now is not the time to go into this. This is the context, the Kabbalistic understanding of the different components of the water cycle, as it's explained in Hasidus and in Kabbalah, I'm sure. Now, the way it's understood in context of our Maimon is that the ocean is a basin, it's a bowl, a yam. The waters collect and they stay in one place. The waters of the ocean are not moving. It's not like a river, where the waters are moving from a high point to a low point. The water stays in one place. The fact that the water has collected in one place means that if you're inside that bowl, you have lots and lots of water. But if you're outside that bowl, you're deprived of the water. The water is held in the basin, so that beyond the basin is dry. So the waters inside the basin would be called yam. The area beyond the basin, where the waters are not reaching, would be called yabosha. So yam holds the water, but it also holds the water back from going onto the dry land. That's why the mysticism is kriyas yam, of Hamshab splitting the yam, hafach yom la yabosha banor yavru baragel, or the waters become yabosha, the water becomes dry land and Yidden could traverse, which means that the level of water, the level of Atzilus, is breaking through the barrier that separates the yam from the yabosha, that the yabosha should also have yam. Now in this Maimon, the Rebbe is saying the opposite, that the yabosha enters into the yam, that in the place of yam you also have yabosha. Those who walk on the dry land are in the same level, those who are in yam. But the key idea, Kabbalistically, of Kriyas Yamsuf is that the yam holds the water back. And Kriyas Yamsuf breaks that holding back unless the water comes through. So, if you understand Kriyas Yamsuf in this context, yam doesn't let the Me'ah Chochmah come into the lower worlds, and Kriyas Yamsuf does. Well, so that was going to be a B'kiyas HaNohor. The B'kiyas HaNohor is a very different thing, because the river doesn't hold the water back. The very meaning of the word Nohor is to run, to rush. So the Mei HaNohor is not holding the water back. It's giving an incredible force to the momentum, to the movement of the water from one place to another. That's what a Nohor means, a river. The raging river with the rushing waters. So it's kind of hard to see Nohor as something which is holding something back like Yam is. So there's a whole different mysticism to Nohor. And that is, Nohor is not seen as something which is holding back. And fakir, to the contrary, Nohor is something which exposes an unusual force. The problem is, because it's so powerful in what it gives, it prevents you from seeing the source. The little tiny trickles of Mayan, which are called Chochmah, don't make a lot of noise, they don't seem very powerful, but they're infinite. And they're living, Mayim Chaim. The raging waters of the Nohor prevent you from seeing it. So Yam is a tzimtzum for the lower worlds. Nohor is a tzimtzum within Atzilus itself, but in an opposite way. The Yam is a tzimtzum by not letting the waters through, and Nohor is a tzimtzum by making the waters very forceful, so you can't pay attention to the source of the water. So Kriyas Yamsuf is breaking the barrier of the Yam that doesn't let the water through. So the water comes into the lower worlds. B'kiyas hanohar is removing the nohar, not so the water that shouldn't come through, so you should know the source. So they're philosophically very different. They're almost opposites. And of course, b'kiyas hanohar is so much higher than kriyas yamsuf. Because whatever the Yam is going to reveal, which is connected to Kriyas Yamsuf and Matan Torah of Nigel Torah, is available in the Nar. The Nar is even higher than the Yam. But it's hiding the Mayan of Chochmah. The B'kiyas HaNar allows us to see the Mayan of Chochmah, which is Mayan Shein Lehem Sof, which is Mayan Chayim, which is going to be revealed Lasad Lavi. This is Torah Chadosha, the Torah of Re'iyah Chochmah. So this is what the Rebbe is saying. There's a similarity in many aspects, and it's represented by physical effects in the world, physical events in the world, the splitting of the sea, the splitting of the river, as described in the Psukim and Chumash and in Navi. And spiritually, it represents these different spiritual ideas, as I just described. Now let's learn it inside. Now inside the mashal that I was going to give is Dibur and Machshava. The Yam is like Dibur, the Nohar is like Machshava. The splitting of the Yam is to get past the tzimtzum of Dibur to get to Machshava. The splitting of the Nar is to split the limitation of Machshava to get to what's even higher than Machshava. Let's read it inside. Ubiyur ha'inyan, says Rabbi, I wish to explain. The Hinei. Ha'hefesh ben Yam, the difference between the sea and the river. The way it is Kabbalistically. Now, of course, when you think about it physically, it's very strange. Why? The most powerful river in the world has so much less water than the oceans. I mean, the oceans are so much more massive than rivers. I mean, even the largest rivers like the Amazon or the Nile, they have, millions and millions of gallons of water, but you can't compare it to the Pacific Ocean or to the Atlantic Ocean or even to the Mediterranean Ocean. There's so much more water in the ocean. And yet the ocean is considered Yam a lower level because the waters are sitting in one place. And the rivers are considered a much higher level because the waters are moving from a place to a place. So the point is that Torah doesn't concern itself with kamas. It doesn't concern itself with the physical volume. It concerns itself with the mystical ideas. And accordingly, Nohar is higher than Yam. Says the Rebbe, Yuvan. It can be understood, and the faculties of human being on this world. The sea is the level of speech. The river is the level of thought. Kiyam, because an ocean is mikveh v'kaima. It's a mikveh. It holds the water in one place. That should stand still. It shouldn't move. The waters are where they are, and they don't go beyond their borders. This is true also in human speech. There's a time to speak and a time to be silent. Time to be silent, time to speak. In other words, just like you can control the waters of an ocean, you can control the words of a person. Sometimes they radiate outward and sometimes they don't. As opposed to the waters of a river that are constantly moving and creeping along. The same is true spiritually. That's Mishitat thought never stops. A person cannot not think. You can just redirect your thought, but a person has to think. This is a Ma'ameh Chazal, Machshava Mishitat Tamid. However, B'shneim in each. Hein believe hein Machshava both in speech and in thought. Yesh Bechinas Helm Bechinas Gil. There's two ideas. There's the way the Dibur hides and what the Dibur exposes. There's the way the Machshava hides and the Machshava reveals. But they're very different. Hein Tzarech Liyinah you have to crack through the way speech hides and the way thought hides to reveal what speech could reveal and what thought could reveal. What is otherwise hidden should be exposed. The Rebbe says, let me explain how this works both in speech and in thought. The Gemara says, a man will never reach a level of understanding of his teacher. For 40 years, a teacher teaches the student, but for the student to ascertain what the teacher really means takes 40 years. This means to say the following. It's self-understood, it's obvious. Words have no meaning. If you don't understand Portuguese and you listen to the best speech ever given in Portuguese, you have nothing, because words are nothing. If you do understand the language, so then really he's giving you words to represent ideas that are not passing from his mouth to your ears. They're passing from his mind to your mind. The words are simply the medium. And the reason they're passing from his mind to your mind is because you're in a position to transition them from here to here. So So let's read it again. Mavad says, first of all, words by themselves, they reveal nothing. Which of course is why the student, the listener, has to have a mind of his own intelligence. And only then, when the teacher speaks and the student hears, he learns, because he has his own mind. And the words simply carry the ideas of the teacher to the mind of the student. Words themselves don't say anything. The ideas are hidden. If a person is not intelligent, let's say you have a computer, a human tape recorder. Some people have a skill; they remember everything they hear. Some people can repeat verbatim what they heard and they have no idea what they said. It says the words say nothing. So the first idea that must be communicated, says the Rebbe, is that words are nothing. The words are only something if, because of the communicator and the communicatee, the mashpi and the makabel, the ideas are transmittable through this medium of words, then it's communicated. Now goes number 2, hinim avazes, in addition. Assuming the student is intelligent. In toils. To expose the idea which is behind these letters. So in other words, he's intelligent, and the teacher talks, and he hears, he listens, and he understands, and he processes, says the Rebbe, Gam Oz, even then. The Rebbe will never know what his teacher knows, how her teacher knows it, until 40 years. Why not? Every idea, like everything, has something called etzem. You know that I hate to translate etzem as essence, so you're going to have to just deal with that fact. I'm not going to translate etzem as essence. Etzem means in relationship with self. Philosophically, in Hasidus, ideas exist before things. Ideas are not the product of things, they're the cause of them. That's how it is in Torah, even though in Chochmas U'umas, I believe it's not that way today. There's a big debate in the old times. If ideas become before things, if everything in the world that exists, take this tool which is used to use on a computer, it's called a mouse. They should start using a kosher name for this fellow here. We'll call it a duck. The physical entity that allows us to use it for the way it's being used was first a conception. It was an idea. But someone had to think of that idea. Real ideas exist before anybody thinks of them. Real ideas are absolute. Just like God exists, ideas exist. This is true b'chlal, but it's particularly true in the sheet of Chakira, which I'm not going to go into at the moment. But ideas exist before things. So when we share ideas, the ideas that you and I are sharing existed before we existed, because ideas came before things. The question is, how close to how those ideas were in theory can we come in our learning? The idea that exists before me and you is called etzem. The idea that you and I know is called shefa, it's called hashpah, it's called communication. So the Rebbe says every teacher knows ideas on some degree of etzem. He cannot communicate that to the students. In other words, just like in an absolute level, ideas exist before things. We'll never know if anybody ever knew those ideas. In a more imminent level, a more immediate level, a teacher has information and he understands them. To him, those ideas exist, at least relatively speaking, on the level of etzem haseichel. There's no way the ideas he knows that in relationship with himself can communicate to the students. Only words and a secondary level of understanding. If the student is ever going to know what the teacher knows, how the teacher knows it, he's going to have to come to it on his own. And of course, according to the Chazal, it takes 40 years. But the idea that exists by itself remains hidden in the words, and it cannot be revealed. And according to the Chazal, it takes 40 years. Of course, you know the Vod, which is brought in the the Alter Rebbe said of himself. That the Gemara says, the Rebbe takes a student 40 years to ascertain, to get to the bottom of what the teacher knows and how he knows it. The Rebbe said it happened to be the same day. The Rebbe said of himself, the Alter Rebbe was able to expedite the Arboy Shnin. But that's the Alter Rebbe. And that's the Rizir Magid. But for most people, it takes 40 years. Why? Because every idea has an essence, and every idea has a gili. The gili of the idea is called dibur. And in as much as the idea has a gili, the